Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, and what a week it's going to be for gaming. I mean, we have the Game Awards, ton of announcements coming our way, the Obsidian RPG is finally going to be revealed, and then, last but certainly not least, here's a bunch of information about Cyberpunk 2077. So this comes from a YouTuber, Open World Games, so I will have linked in the description down below. Also, along with the two sources that are delivering this information, Video Games 24/7 and PC Gamer. Now, Video Games 24/7 broke the story that I think is one of the weirdest I've seen this year, considering it was through Facebook messaging between CD Projekt Red and a fan. On top of that, PC Gamer got to see a private demo of Cyberpunk 2077, the same one that we all saw on YouTube months ago, but the difference was that they were in a room more one-on-one with the developers where they could slow down the pace at any point in time and get a better look at certain details and ask questions along the way. So let's start off with that strange news story about Facebook messaging in Cyberpunk 2077. A fan said, "Hello, CD Projekt Red. I'm amped for the game. I was curious to know how big the game world will be compared to The Witcher 3. Thanks." CD Projekt Red said, "Night City holds 6 districts, but I can't give you an exact number in square meters because no one counted them yet. Also, this is tricky for an urban environment. Night City has lots of buildings, and these buildings have floors. You can have 120 square meters of space, technically taking up 60 meters squared of space in a tall building, and we will have many of them explorable. Each floor can house a lot of activity. Floors stack. The Witcher 3 was, in a way, much flatter. The activities were scattered. Here, the world can be huge, but it can also be huge upwards and downwards." Furthermore, CD Projekt Red said that Night City is the biggest world it has created, split over 6 districts: City Center, Santo Domingo, Pacifica, Watson, Haywood, and Westbrook. Naturally, this makes sense. It's no disrespect to The Witcher 3's open world because it was more medieval, we'll say, where this is set in a urban environment where there is the expectation of buildings to be placed in this area and give the world a sense of verticality. The difference, though, is we'll take a game that I actually love quite a bit, like Sleeping Dogs, which everything was accessible on ground level, but you didn't have that sense of verticality, so you were always street level despite being surrounded by huge building. So it's very important that CD Projekt Red stress that you can go in these buildings, you can go up these buildings, or you can go downwards, maybe underground. Anyway, it's also good to know about the 6 districts within the Cyberpunk world for us to continuously dissect details. But now let's get into the very long piece from PC Gamer about what questions were answered during their time with Cyberpunk 2077. And also, I want to stress I'm not going to try to pronounce some of these developers' names because I feel like I'd be doing them a disservice with my pronunciation. One of the most striking things about the game setting, Night City, is how vibrant it is compared to the dark, rain-soaked dystopia usually associated with the genre. Cyberpunk 2077 is set in a future California, and the writer tells me that the studio is going to great lengths to capture the Golden State's distinctive atmosphere. "We want to give Night City a Californian feel," he says. "It's not just another abstract dystopia. I visited LA for the first time this year, and it was very inspiring, especially walking along Venice Beach. We want to bring some of that vibe to the game. The sun, the palm trees, but a darker side. It's an incredibly diverse place with all these different people, fashions, and cultures sharing the same space, but it can also be dangerous." As we walk through Watson, which is one of the districts I mentioned earlier, a bustling shopping entertainment district bombarded by neon billboards, the passing hordes of citizens give me a sense of this diversity, and I don't see one repeated character model. Crowds are generated semi-procedurally to avoid repetition, mixing body parts, faces, clothes, and hairstyles, and CD Projekt Red promises the finished game will feature an even greater variety of heights, weights, and body shapes. I feel as if the game that this crowd variety kind of started with and was showing that, wow, this is very important to building a believable world space, was actually Hitman Absolution, because their crowd technology there created these massive swarms of people in the area, made it feel like you were in a very cluttered space. It brought the universe to life in a way despite the world not being open. So to see that type of technology be put into a big open world space like what we've seen with Cyberpunk 2077, good news. Watson is a multicultural district with a strong Asian influence and a rising crime problem. But there are other districts too, each with their own unique feel. Westbrook is where the middle class lives. Haywood was once home to the tech giants, but abandoned and left to rot. And Pacifica is a suburban district ruled by gangs, and the most dangerous place in the city. Wherever you are in the city, there is a layer of darkness. It's also important to emphasize here that none of these places sound good. They're all kind of messed up. The devil's in the details. The third-person camera in The Witcher floated slightly above NPCs, which we took into account when animating them, But now we can really look at what they're doing up close, and we've improved the animation to reflect it. When we animate characters, even the NPCs, we think about their personality and their past, the way they move, or something in their face that might reveal something about them. We work from the inside out. We also changed the way we do facial animation, moving to a new muscle-based system. We have a huge library of facial animations, which I think is important in a first-person game. You can get close to people now, and this new tech lets us pick out more subtle details in the faces. When you first see a street vendor, he'll be trying to sell you something, calling you over to look at his food, and you should be able to see the enthusiasm in his face as well as his body language. What we're talking about here is one of the most important aspects of any good open world game, and that is world building. It's showcasing emotion, it's building distinct different districts, stuff that may fly under the radar for some gamers when you get fully immersed in the quests and the dialogue and whatnot, but these are key details that complete the experience and bring it over to the top. What we've seen of Cyberpunk 2077 so far has been largely focused on action. However, that is just one aspect of the game. Some Cyberpunk is more pulpy and driven by action, stuff like Terminator or RoboCop, but then there's a more philosophical side of the game. Think Blade Runner or Ghost in the Shell. Our mission is to give players a strong element of both. You'll experience the thrill of using cybernetic implants and high-tech weaponry in combat, but there's also depth in the story. We want to ask questions about what identity and individuality are in a world where people are so closely connected with technology. I'm personally a big fan of when developers source other games and movies as their inspiration, because then it encourages those who are really pumped for the game or really want to see some of the source material that inspired what this universe is kind of being based off of philosophically and just general inspiration, I guess, right? To check those out and to get a good feel of what the developers may be thinking. Now this part will pump everyone up. Everything starts with a story at CD Projekt Red, and that every department from quest design to cinematic animation has intimate working relationships with the writers. In one scene, the writers wanted Meredith Stout, a corporation boss, to look visibly nervous and frustrated because she knows someone in her corp is trying to screw her over, he says. So we took that direction and animated her accordingly. As CD Projekt Red rises as some of the best storytellers in an open world setting in our industry, this is why. It starts with the writing. It's not like they animate a scene and then fill it in with the writing. The scene is written and they build it around the emotions depicted through the writing and have the writers check out those scenes and approve everything. That's awesome. This is what happens. This is how good stories are told and how emotions are delivered to the player. Another of CD Projekt Red's high-level goals for Cyberpunk is making the game as seamless as possible, from being able to move around the city without any loading breaks to conversations. In The Witcher, you talk to someone and there's a transition to dialogue, then back to the world when you're finished. But here, we want the blend of story and action to be seamless, which is really challenging from a writing perspective. If you turn and look at something during a conversation, we want the NPC to notice. We want the reactivity in the game to be super high. It's almost like you're an actor in a scene rather than just passively watching it play out. While Geralt was an established character with a long history, V is much more malleable, allowing for deeper role-playing experiences. The key rule for us is that V is you. The choices that you make affect the story and shape the character. But at the same time, V is not a blank slate. They're a mercenary on the rise. They want to become a legend in Night City. There's a character there, but you get to play around with them and give them more shades than you could with Geralt. The game is a journey and there is an end to it, but you get to decide which path V takes to get there. One of the major ways you'll shape V is through quests. We want the characters you meet in-game to respond to you and your actions. That's not just about having enough points in a certain stat or something like that. Instead, it's, did you talk to this guy earlier? What information did you get? If you found the information, you can use it later. If you killed the guy's friend instead of doing something for him, he won't help you anymore. We love that kind of reactivity. Choice and consequence. This is what makes the best of the best role-playing games, and seeing CD Projekt Red emphasize, we start with writing, they're talking about building the character, they're being transparent of how this character is, where yes, it's established, there is a bit of a backstory, but you kind of put your own shades on this character. It reminds me of the birth of a great series, Mass Effect. Although it did go on ice and didn't have the greatest run as of late, you get what I'm talking about. Mass Effect 1, 2, and even parts of 3. Holy crap, some of the best role-playing in video games to date. And some of these design decisions echo those very aspects of that game. Commander Shepard does have an established story, does have a journey that starts and finishes, but how you get there, it's up to you. The quests that are designed are fed back to QA, which will then be given a logic pass, outlining things they think they should be able to do. If it makes sense for the player to solve a problem in a particular way, CD Projekt Red wants to cater for it. There's room for emergence, he says, when I ask if the game will share any qualities with an immersive sim like Deus Ex. It's not exactly Breath of the Wild, but it does happen. We'll build something imagining players doing it a certain way, but QA will play it and say I should be able to do this. Then that gets added and the complexity increases. So interesting stuff emerges more from the logic than the systems. The future setting also gives CD Projekt Red many more ways to throw quests at you. Having a setting with telecommunication makes all the difference. It's also more immersive. How do you get a quest in the real world? Usually it's a phone call or a text message. Can you go pick up groceries? Our open world team is constantly filling the city with little events that can feed into our quests. You'll see some dudes on the street and eavesdropping might lead to a quest. Or maybe because you talk to them, you might see them a couple of hours later in another quest and get some reactivity there. Compared to a medieval world, a bustling metropolis is much better for drawing players into quests. You'll be able to walk along the street and suddenly you'll be drawn to a story. There are so many narrative hooks that can lure the player in, and that's something we love doing. People love the quests in The Witcher that would start out as something simple, but grow into something bigger, more complex, and we want to bring that to Cyberpunk. I'll loop it back to Cyberpunk in a second, but this is why I was so impressed with Red Dead Redemption 2, because it was created in a time period way back when where it is hard to have the player constantly engaged, have something really always active in the open world, pulling for your attention, but still somehow Rockstar managed to pull it off in a believable fashion. So it does make sense that in a metropolis where a ton of people are aggregating in one area, that there are those narrative hooks, those call outs to the player to go get invested in something new every 20 seconds, for God's sakes, you see nowadays. Now, granted, we haven't seen any new gameplay. CD Projekt Red is keeping the project very tight to their chest, but I feel I speak for everyone when I feel that Cyberpunk 2077 is that next game that stands a chance to really shift the gaming landscape, kind of like how Red Dead Redemption 2 is. We see Red Dead Redemption 2, and now you're going to see a lot of games try to echo what that game brought to the table. Same thing I personally feel with Cyberpunk 2077. They're focusing on writing first, building out from there. We kind of saw the impact of The Witcher 3 on a game like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, one of the best games to come out of this past year. But anyway, that's all I've got for you when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077. I'm so pumped for this game. I'm hoping that we actually see it drop next year, although I know the chances are becoming a little more slim, but hey, fingers can cross, the man can dream. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments down below, so do fire away, ladies and gentlemen. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all the content I create here. Stay sexy, stay active. Love you all. Peace.